The ability that I think is so exciting is first and foremost to help decrease the cognitive load that so many of us have now taken on. It's like, wow, I have electricity I don't have to light candles anymore. I always look at it as augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. Now, what that does, it frees me. You said the two magical words. It frees me to actually get in touch with my cognition, all right? Which is, that's going back to now Roman times. Cognition is more of a very, very 20th century idea, like IQ test, class rank. Back in the day, warriors didn't have that. They needed trust, going back to the trust word. So I think what is happening with the AI, it is decreasing that cognitive loads that we can actually be our best essence, which is our cognitive instinct, our instinctive nature, our affective capability, and we can be fully human in the best possible way.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Welcome back to the RevOps Champions podcast. Today, I'm honored to have with me Tony D'Angelo. He's the founder of Collegiate Empowerment and the creator of The Intellectual Capitalist, registered trademark. He empowers growth-minded, ambitious, and decisive entrepreneurs, otherwise known, he calls GMAD, to turn surplus understanding into cash-flowing intellectual property assets. With more than 30 years of experience building and monetizing IP, he teaches that IP is property and the top asset class of the S&P 500, and therefore must be protected, packaged, and profitable. Tony's mission is to help 2,500 entrepreneurs create over $1 billion in IP asset value by 2035. I think he's going to surpass that personally, unlocking new revenue and royalties through the 7 stages and 7 mindsets of intellectual capitalism. Tony, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Brendon, this is a true joy. I'm so excited. We had a wonderful time in Charlotte together, and I just love seeing you again here on the podcast. So thank you for having me. And most importantly, listeners, thank you for checking this out. I trust that we're going to bring a lot of value to your business model, to your thinking, and to this idea that everyone listening is actually an intellectual capitalist. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the way you teased that, Tony, because when I first heard you talk about that a few months, I'm like, what is he talking about? Which I'm guessing is going to be the first reaction, or is the first reaction that a lot of people have. And so I'm really looking forward to the value that you're going to be bringing to our audience today.
Yeah, well, let me start. I have to start by first a full disclaimer, just to be clear. I'm not an IP attorney. I don't play one here on the internet. Kim Kardashian passed the bar. I never have and never will. Don't plan to. I'm also not a tax attorney, but I am what I am. I'm an intellectual capitalist. What does that mean? And listeners, tune into this. The idea of an intellectual capitalist is somebody who has understanding. So intellectual means understanding. Capitalist, in its finest sense, means you have surplus. So every one of your listeners, you, Brendon, myself, every human being you meet has some sort of surplus understanding. And if you begin to understand that it didn't come from you, it came through you, from your creator, that it's divinely inspired, but it's also your right to have it as your property. And so what the intellectual capitalist is about evangelizing and awakening and helping you unleash your inner intellectual capitalist, not only for you and your business, but for humanity. So that's the big ambition here. No small goal here. It's a big one.
Yeah, I like your sort of attitude. And I know we talk a lot about when you and I meet roughly every 90 days, which is this whole sort of mentality of being a go-giver. Because again, we all have a lot to give. And for those of you, I've mentioned this on the show before, but for those of you who have not yet read the book, The Go-Giver, I highly recommend you read it. And apparently there's an entire series. I've just read the original version, but I know Tony is also a go-giver, even though he's also here as an intellectual capitalist.
Oh, absolutely.
Tony, maybe so share with us, how did you become so passionate about the power and value of intellectual property?
Yeah. So my personal mission in life is to advance education that transforms lives. So I've always been an educational entrepreneur from that get-go. Now, my space is here in the US, in North America, the US higher education system. So I've personally spent over 30 years. I've been one of the very few people who've literally lectured at over 2,500 US colleges. And I will also give full disclosure, most of those universities I'm not academically gifted enough to get accepted to, but I was intelligent enough to figure out how to have them as clients. So I did something right there. But through that journey, I began to see what is fundamentally missing in the American, specifically American higher education system in the core curriculum, whether it's financial education, completely lack of that. And then more recently, my awareness and understanding around intellectual property, that you can literally go get 3 MBAs from the finest institutions. And maybe if you're lucky, you're going to get 1 or 2 courses on intellectual property law. So I see a great need, particularly for our entrepreneurs, our experts, our executives, our esquires. I mean, let's throw all the E's out there, that we need to bring back one of the great things here in North America or any of the British law, common law countries, of this power of this idea that you have an inherent right to own your ideas, whether you're an individual or a company or corporation. And again, I like to say, don't take my word for it. Look at the S&P 500. You mentioned this. If we go back when I was born in 1972, only 10% of the S&P 500 valuation was in intangible property. It was 90% were the steel, the buildings, the factory, the equipment, all that heavy capital intensive. And here we are, fast forward to 2025, and that's literally inverted. It's went from 10% intangible property to now 90%. 90% of the S&P 500 valuation is in this subject matter, this asset class of intangible, or in this case, intellectual property. So I'll be frank. I mean, I love my S&P 500 index, but I really don't care about that. What I care about is you, the entrepreneur, you, the business owner, you, the C-suite. Do you have IP on your balance sheet? It is the biggest asset class of the S&P 500. If they have it, why not you? So that's my personal ambition.
Yeah. Well, actually, to add to that, I would say, depending on the month, in excess of 70% of our clients run on EOS. And one of the things that I'm familiar with, for example, in EOS, because we also run on EOS. Most companies that run on EOS have a proven process, or really any company that's properly running on EOS should have a proven process. In strategic coach, for example, that's called your unique process. But if companies have done a really good job at creating that proven process, surely that would be considered an asset as IP?
100%. So let's get to the brass tacks. So first, I always like to say, when you hear the word IP, people often freeze up. You create literally a mountain in your head, a fictitious mountain. I call it Mount IP. And it can be overwhelming. So we're going to kind of help listeners climb up Mount IP. I also will remind you, your goal whenever you're climbing a mountain is not just to only get to the top. It's actually to get down the other side and get home safely. So we want to take listeners up this ascent and descent down to get to what I would call the IP fertile farmland of their bigger future. But what you just said, you have a unique, the key word there is unique. It was divinely inspired. Typically, it came from your pain or the pain of your customers. As Dan Sullivan would say, all of your IP is found in the dangers of your hero target. So you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a technologist, as a creator, you came up with a solution. Again, I want to say it came through you. You're just a big Wi-Fi router. You picked it up, you iterated it, you tested it, and it began to work. You proofed it. And then, as we've learned at Strategic Coach, you make it up, you make it real, you make it reoccur. I'll add one more last piece. You make it last. And when you put intellectual property around that process, that's how you make it last. So what do I mean specifically? So when it comes to intellectual property, so you have intangible property, which is a big class, which is like domains, blockchaining, Carrie Oberbrunner is doing with instant IP, trade secrets. There's other things. We're looking specifically at copyrights. So when you write code, that's copywritten. When you have a business brand, that's a trademark. And ideally, you can have some technology that's patented. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, that buy now button on Amazon, that's a patent. That page rank of Google search, that's a patent. So if these big guys can do it, so can you. And realizing that every big guy or big girl at one time was just a little guy, a little girl who had an idea, who had a thought. And that thought became a process that began to solve a problem. And when you can utilize, in this case, trademarks, there's 45 different types of trademark classes. And again, here in the US, Canada, UK, pretty same and similar, but I'm really proficient in US trademarks.
Mhm.
But of those 45 trademark types, 35 are for goods and services, for products, for physical things. Now, most of the listeners on this show live not in the mainland, you live in Cloudlandia, right? You're up there in the cloud. Like that's where Brendon, you are in Minneapolis and I'm in Pennsylvania right now, right? So, or
Mhm.
Minnesota, I'm in Pennsylvania. And so we are connecting the cloud. Those cloud-based capabilities are all services. So class 35 to 45 are available to you as entrepreneurs, as engineers, as builders, as inventors, as creators to actually utilize to claim property, to kind of put a name around it, to put a deed under this great idea you've been spending most of your life building.
Mm. And those are the classes as classified by the USPTO.
Yes,
Yeah.
USPTO stands for US, United States Patent and Trademark Office. So notice copyrights are done through the Library of Congress. They are a type of intellectual property, but we're really focused here on patents and trademarks. They all go in hand,
Mhm.
but exactly it. Yeah, USPTO.
So, and just as a refresher, Tony. So, what is the sequence? So, if let's just say the folks listening, and we can get to potentially how much value they have in intellectual property sitting on their balance sheets. But we'll keep going with this sort of unique process or the proven process as they call it in EOS, and then sort of get into others. But let's just say that there's some listeners who say, oh yeah, let's see if we can somehow develop IP around our proven process. What is the first step that you suggest they take?
Well, before I do that, let me kind of go because I love my intimate story with EOS. Remember being in a strategic coach workshop. This is circa 2007, 2006. And Gino Wickman
Mm.
was working on this book, and he said, I remember and he was my partner, and we're in the coach in Chicago, and he pulls this book out, and he goes, "I got these two cover designs. I just got them back from the printer." And the book title's called Traction. And one was just like a soft, like cheap cover. And then this other one had like this rubber. If you've ever touched the original Traction book, had like this rubber tie. I go, Gino, that's it. Do that one. What Gino was doing, listeners, particularly if you're part of EOS,
Uh-huh.
he had an idea. He was able to figure out how to solve a problem. And he used, are you pulling up the book,
Well,
Brendon?
I mean, I have it back here, but
Do you have it? Pull it up. Find
well,
it. Go ahead for
uh,
listeners and for viewers, because this is IP realized.
although in fact,
And
I just realized I probably threw it in my bag when I was traveling
okay,
last week
all
and
right.
haven't
So
taken it out.
you're taking off with Traction. There we go.
Yeah.
But what Gino was doing at the time, he was solving a problem. See, here's the thing. Today in the 21st century, feel four energies. They feel confused, they feel isolated, they feel powerless, and they feel overwhelmed. I'll say this again: confused, isolated, powerless, and overwhelmed. And you as an entrepreneur, you as an engineer, you as an EOS implementer, whatever, part of what you do for humanity is you bring a solution to one of those four energies. If you are strong with leadership, you bring a sense of clarity to those who are confused. You bring a sense of capability to the powerless if you're really good with creativity. If you're really good with management, you bring a sense of coordination for the person who feels overwhelmed. And
Mhm.
last but not least, if you're really good at relationship, you bring connection to the people who feel isolated. What I just said, what I'm really communicating are you're creating a brand, you're creating an idea that is in the mind of the aspirant. So instead of share of market, in intellectual property, we talk about share of mind. And when you can really get clear with a solution that's really useful, because that's what the Constitution says. It says, in order to promote the progress of your useful art or idea, okay, when you can create that, you can actually own a piece of mind share of another human being. That's
Mhm.
pretty profound. So what Gino's done with Traction and EOS, like if you're in that space, we know exactly what it is, right? I love to always get right into the political and just not ruffle any feathers. So I'll show you the power of a brand, and what I'm about to say are registered trademarks. Okay. So somebody filed them, and you can love them or hate them, but here they are. Make America Great. That's going to have a visceral reaction to you one way or the other. Or on the other, Black Lives Matter. So when we begin to understand that we as human beings, again, we're confused, we're isolated, we're powerless, and we're overwhelmed. We are creators, but created by a creator. We've got these great solutions. They could be brands, they could be processes, they could be ideas, but you have the capability. You have the not only moral right, but you have the constitutional right. You have the legal right to actually name it, claim it, domain it, and put it on your balance sheet and get it
Mhm.
to cash flow. So that's why I love this subject. I mean, I got to make IP fun. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, and I think you really do because, and I mean, since I've been learning more about IP this year, I've realized that it's such a misunderstood but
Yeah.
underutilized form of asset value, which is why I was so excited to have you on the show, because I'm pretty sure that a large percentage of the folks listening are going to go, why would Brendon be interviewing Tony about intellectual property
Right.
when what we really do is help companies use software. You're talking about how we live in the cloud, is how to use software to drive the growth in their business. And we're not thinking about the fact that whatever software we're implementing or integrating, which are all, again, brands which are owned by somebody, and they all have processes that are all
Mhm.
trademarked and patented potentially in some cases. We don't even think about that, but anything that is intangible and is growing in value, if it's not protected or owned, the leadership teams of those companies realize eventually that they're leaving a lot of value
A
behind.
lot of value. Again, I always look at anybody who's in a service-based business. My family, I grew up in the central Pennsylvania area, and my entire family is in real estate.
Okay.
From my father's a land surveyor, my other uncle's a builder, my other uncle is a real estate broker. So they understood tangible property intimately well.
Mm.
Now, for some reason, I didn't get that gene. I got the intangible gene. But here you are as an entrepreneur, as a C-suite executive, and you've been committed, what, 20, 30 years to your company or organization. You literally been out in a field building a castle called your business, called your enterprise, but you never filed the deed. You never honored the fact that there are legal structures to protect and profit and promote what it is you've been building for the past 20 years.
Right.
So my biggest sin for an entrepreneur is that they've spent all their time, all their energy, their entire life. They got some revenue to show for it, but at the end, no, let's have an asset on the balance sheet. So that's the ambition here.
Right.
But you're not alone. And by the way, go back to the metaphor of the Mount IP. Right? There's three big dangers that every entrepreneur, every executive will face when it comes to scaling Mount IP. Now, I'll say it again. The goal is not only to get up Mount IP, the goal is to get up and then back down. So first and foremost, intellectual property, the biggest danger is what we call, number one, IP ignorance. You don't know that you don't know that you don't know. And
Hmm.
so you either do nothing, or even worse, let me say that again, or even worse, you go to market, you go into the world with a brilliant idea, with a brilliant strategy, with a brilliant solution, yet you never packaged or protected it. Let me
Hmm.
bring it back to the real estate metaphor. So instead of your business, you say, hey, Tony, hey, Brendon, why don't you come down to my beautiful place in Miami? I built an oceanfront property. And we're like, Brendon and I are like, oh man, this is beautiful. You're like, yeah, it's got 28 bedrooms. It's got 30 bathrooms. It's got a pool for you, a pool for Brendon, a pool for you, listener. I mean, it is amazing. We're like, wow, this is fascinating. You took all this time to build this house. It's amazing. And then I go, I just got to ask you, friend. I know you built the house, but do you own the deed to the oceanfront property here? And you're like, no, I don't. What most entrepreneurs do, because of IP ignorance, they go right to market with an idea, with a product. And here's what they fail to realize. In the 21st century, if you don't have an IP strategy for your business, you will come into contact with an entrepreneur or an enterprise that will have an IP strategy for your business. And I promise me, because I've been through this, it's not going to be the strategy that you are hoping for.
Mm.
So this first stage, IP ignorance, this is why you're listening to this show. This is why we're even bringing it up. So, Brent, I think you're giving your listeners such a great, awareness exposure to this asset class. Again,
Hmm.
it's the number one asset class of the S&P 500. It's not their buildings. It's not the stocks. Matter of fact, it's the brand. It's the brand that they've created. Now, again, we think big brands. There can be small brands. It doesn't need to be massive. But it's yours and it's
Hmm.
your property. So, number one,
Hmm.
IP danger is IP ignorance. Number
Right.
two is IP fog. You start to climb the mountain, you get in the clouds, and you slip in a crevice or crack because you get overwhelmed and you don't do anything. The third danger is IP gap. So anybody who's familiar with Dan Sullivan, as Brendon and I are, we love strategic coach, the idea of the gap and the gain. You hear the word patent and you get paralyzed because you could have this paralysis, like I have to be perfect with no, don't overwhelm yourself with a patent. Start with your domain, start with your copyright, start with your trademark,
Hmm.
then work up that to that level. So IP gap. Then there's a fourth one. Can I share it with listeners? And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure.
The fourth one's a little sneaky because those first three, entrepreneur, executive, they're internal. They're your own dangers. And that's why we want to help resolve those. But the other danger is what I call IP arrogance. And it's kind of like in defense of why you may not know about IP. Number one, IP arrogance from the education system, which I mentioned at the beginning here. And number two, IP arrogance from the legal system. So I shared with you on the education side, I will just say this out loud. The reason why we have intellectual property law is to advance knowledge. Yet, when you look at our university system here in the US, it's not about advancing knowledge. It is not. And that is an opportunity for you as an entrepreneur. I don't want to get into what it's about or what it's become now, but it's lost its way. And IP is one of the fundamental ways it can find its roots once again. I hope they will. The other is the legal industry. So the downside or the legal IP arrogance from the legal industry is they don't approach it from the standpoint of creating an asset. All they do is create a property. And we're not. We're here to create assets. An asset generates cash flow. An asset, it has a capital gain component where it can be bought low and sold high, or create it for zero and then go up in value. It could be collateralized. You could use it to raise capital without giving up any control and or going into debt. So you collateralize it. And the fourth thing that an asset has, it has a tax benefit to it. So when you start to see that this is an asset class, unlike an attorney is just going to look at it as property. So that's it in a nutshell. Those are the four dangers. I'll say them one more time: IP inquiries, IP fog, IP gap, and IP arrogance. Which one do you want to break down more?
Well, so I think the IP arrogance one is an interesting one, because I've heard a couple of examples of really successful entrepreneurs who've built some incredible, what again from the outside looks like incredible IP, right? But then when they're approached and said, well, hey, have you protected the intellectual property around your product? The example I'm thinking about is a product. And they were like, no, I'm fine if other people want to use all this incredible value that we've been able to create over 20, 30 years. I'm totally fine if other people want to use that. Give us, sort of complete that story for us. When,
Sure.
and you've already alluded to it, which is what'll happen if another entrepreneur finds your product amazing and you haven't protected it.
Yeah. Well, this is the other side of the coin. Remember, if you don't have the IP strategy, you're going to come into contact with somebody who does have the IP strategy. Here is the other key thing: all intellectual property. So if we go up to the mountain to the top and get down the other side, the goal of all intellectual property, when understood from a capitalist, from an abundance mindset, not from a scarcity mindset. And again, I always cite the Constitution. Never in the Constitution do you see the word protect, defend, flee. You don't see those words. What you do see in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, it's called the IP clause. It said it's the only time that the word right, R-I-G-H-T, is used in the U.S. Constitution. Think about that. In the original, now in the Bill of Rights, okay, which is an amendment to the Constitution, it's there, right? It's the Bill of Rights, right?
Yeah.
But in the original Founding Fathers document, they said you have an exclusive right. What does the word exclusive right mean? It means property. So just like you have an exclusive right to the fruits of your labor, if you're a farmer and you plant a tree and it grows apples, you can sell those apples. That is the fruits of your labor. If you're a builder and you build real estate, if you're a miner and you dig gold out of the earth and take a commodity and bring it, that's your property. The same is true with these ideas that you have. So you don't have to do any IP. You can give it away. And there's many inventions, and particularly in the medical space, that have helped humanity. I couldn't rattle one off the top, but some people are like, no, I don't want to patent it. I just want to give it away. So you're welcome to do that. But the goal of all intellectual property is to have it be progressed. And the way we progress it is we call licensing. So real estate, and if you look at the best real estate in the world, it is owned by very, very generous people. Why are they generous? Because they don't license the property, they rent it out, right? Some of the most beautiful resorts are owned by investors, capitalists who had surplus. Yeah, I mean, they can spend a couple days there, but they're not going to live there forever. They want other people to utilize it. And so when you look at this idea, when it comes to intellectual property, you don't rent it, you license it. And in exchange for the license, you, the creator, ultimately will get a royalty payment.
Right.
So that's ultimately where the pathway you want to go. You look at so what are we talking? The show's called what? RevOps Champion. So we want to champion. You got revenue coming in. I'm going to suggest not in the case of the S&P 500, which is 90% of its valuation is coming from their intellectual property. Forget about them. Forget about 90%. Forget about 50%. Forget about 30%, listeners. Just begin to think about 18.25%. Yeah, that's right. 18.25%. Just so I can be specific. What do I mean by that? Say you have a line of business that's generating $2 million in revenue. Okay, $2 million in revenue coming in. I'm going to suggest that 18.25% of that revenue is coming in as a result of some of your, listen to what I'm about to say, of your undocumented, unidentified intellectual property. It's kind of like a UFO out there in outer space, right? And so it's unidentified, but it's there. It's causing revenue to come in. Not all your revenue, not 90% of your revenue, 18.25% of your revenue. 18.25% of your revenue of $2 million is what number? Well, it's $365,000. $1,000 a day of your revenue is coming in from roughly 36%, 36.5% of your revenue. And just like real estate, how do you value real estate? Well, you value real estate of what it could get if you rented it into the marketplace. That's typically, well, again, we don't rent IP, we license IP. So the licensing revenue of $365,000 in licensing revenue for I'm not talking medical device. I'm talking, again, any of these classes, 35 to 45, is roughly 20%. 20% licensing fee. Okay. Now, again, depends upon what you're offering, what the deal is, but I just put 20%. Just trying to get some revenue on your balance sheet that is linked to your IP. 20% is $73,000. $73,000 a year in licensing revenue that could be generated from your IP. And if you then have either a work for hire agreement, or you have an engineer on staff, or you're an independent entrepreneur and you have a holding company that holds the IP and licenses it back, well, then you're entitled to half of that, which is roughly a 10% of the net revenue. 10% royalties, $36,500. So $10 a day in royalty income that could and can come to you when you start to take this asset class seriously. Now, I went deep on the breakdown there. You have questions on that, Brian? I don't know. Did I?
No, I think it's a great question to leave people with, because I can tell you I'm not thinking that way, and I'm guessing a lot of people listening aren't thinking that way either. That there's a certain percentage of their revenue that is essentially IP that they could be licensing, whatever the fraction or percentage is. So I guess the question, anyway, so I think people can kind of do with that what they may. I guess where my head goes is, we also know that because of how AI is literally changing the world around us right now. So the IP landscape is constantly changing as technology, primarily AI, evolves. So what mindset shifts do you think will help leaders stay ahead of emerging threats and or opportunities as technology continues to evolve?
Yeah, I think number one, we should always humble ourselves. We think, oh, we're in such this massive change and transformation. Yes, we are, and so is humanity has always been. Okay, so you hit on a really key thing of the mindsets of an intellectual capitalist. An intellectual capitalist knows this: as technology advances, so too what we call intellectual property. So let's do a quick history review, because as Dan Sullivan teaches, before we get overwhelmed and anxious about the future, we've been here before, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. I mean that lovingly. I mean, I jokingly remind people, I live in a really cool town in Pennsylvania. It's a little colonial town. It was around during the Declaration of Independence. It's about an hour north of Philadelphia, an hour west of Manhattan. And we got the great New Jersey Barrier Reef separating me. But I was at my yoga studio, which at one time was a major textile plant, because textiles were like the raging industry. That was the new technology of the day. I do yoga, where 3 generations ago, somebody was slaving away in a 90-degree building trying to make silk into fabric. So the whole idea here, let's go back. So the first type of intellectual property, and we could go into the Greeks and the Romans. That's a little too antiquity, but kind of modern age period of time would be Venice. So Venice, before we had the nation state, city states, and Venice used the patent system to give people a privilege. And this is when it was a monopoly. Like, hey, I'm the king, right? I'm a Medici. And Brendon, you get to be the only one here in Venice to make candles. And my sister-in-law gets to make the soap. And that was the racket of the time. And it was a favor. Now, the patents were granted, to encourage trade and encourage immigration. Like, hey, you bring your new invention here to Venice, man, we're going to give you exclusive right. That's the concept of the monopoly. So it was there in the original structure,
Hmm.
but we're not there anymore. Probably the biggest patented item that really had things transform is something when Gutenberg invented the printing press, so around 1500. Capability actually creates a new type of IP asset class, which is copyright. So we have patents are first, then we have copyrights. Well, copyright originally it wasn't for the author, it was for the person who printed the book. They owned the block, they had the right to that copy block.
Hmm.
And so that's where copyright eventually began. But as things began to transform, okay, so too what we defined copyrights. And copyrights ultimately became into any work created by an artist or an author. It also then began where it became the ownership of the person who created it or the company who owned it. So if you're in the C-suite and maybe your team is work for hire agreements or you're an entrepreneur, when it is the creator or the company that writes the check to the creator, that all happens when we have circuses because the artwork for a circus tent, okay, that's what created the copyright law that we know today that allows basically a company to own the IP. It's really
Wow.
important.
Hmm.
All right. So patents, copyrights, trademarks don't come into effect. They're not in the Constitution. Okay. First, we didn't have the word entrepreneur in 1790. All right. Matter of fact, all of the founding fathers, while they were capitalists, they also were inventors. They were also, most of them were some sort of author. So that's why they protected the authorship
Hmm.
and the patent or the invention. Move forward, we don't have trademarks till we get mass distribution of products because of the canals and the railroads. And so again, a new type of technology. Stay with me. I'm going to get to AI
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
think about the train, right? Blockchain is going to come back, ladies and gentlemen. The train just delivered the goods out to the masses. And so that's when people began to mark their trade. So that those pair of jeans that manufactured, they were Levi's or they were Wranglers, right? Their branding was part of that, and it became federal. That's around 1870. Fast forward, so we're operating really smoothly throughout the industrial age, and then boom, what happens? 1998, the Berlin Wall comes down. By 1995, the World Wide Web goes up. And now here we are in Cloudlandia. But in 1985, somebody created a little code called www. The first domain was officially bought and sold. I forget what it's called. It's like Syntac or Syntec, but that's 1985. Now, you and I easily buy domains today in the 21st century. I bought 3 domains today, right?
Hmm.
Because listeners, we don't live in the mainland, we live in Cloudlandia. So again, back to the share of mind that you can start to own. Like Gino owns Traction, EOS. You know what it means. If you're in EOS, you got it. If you don't, what the hell is EOS? That's the point. That's the point of the brand. You
Hmm.
clearly are. In recent times, you're either a Blue Jays fan or a Dodgers fan, right? One of the two. You can't be both at the same time. So bringing it back now, AI. Back to the question. As technology advances, so too what we will define as intellectual property. So to answer your question, honestly, I don't know yet, but I do know it'll have something to do with blockchain. This is where Kerry Oberbrunner and what he's been doing with instant IP.
Hmm.
I would absolutely, if I'm new to the IP world, I recommend, Dan Sullivan said it the best. He said, patents are the nuclear weapons of the intellectual property world. And he's 1,000% right, but they're powerful and they're expensive. But
Right.
if you go up the chain and you look right before domains, I would get blockchain. I think blockchain is going to be something that we're going to be paying attention to because all IP is about timing. It's all about when, not where.
Yeah.
Let
That
me say that
timestamp.
again.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, one of my trademarks, the most recent trademark I own is when, not where. Because in the 21st century, it's when. When did I come up with the idea? When did I actually file the idea? When did I put it in the blockchain? So that timing mechanism is crucial. I'll
Hmm.
pause there. I threw a lot on the table. I apologize, but I wanted to take you through that because we've been through this tumultuous, crazy time before. It's just, we don't have to think we're so special as humans. We're not, right?
Yeah.
We're doing things exactly like the Venetians did. Wow, this new patent law. How are we going to cope with it? What do you think? My goodness, people are stopped memorizing things and printing the written word, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's how the church came down. So yes, things are going to transform. Things are going to get disrupted. But I will tell you at the core is going to be this idea of property law. It
Hmm.
is because that's what keeps a society civil and sane. So that's where I think we are with AI.
Yeah. Which is actually reminds me of a really powerful question that I learned from Dan Sullivan is change is, again, is constant, right? And people, a lot of us are very excited about change because change means progress. But Dan asked the question is, okay, so but you have to ask yourself what is going to stay the same,
Yep.
right? So some things change and some things never change.
Yeah.
But it's different for all of us. We have to write those things down and
Yep.
record those things for ourselves. Like, what are the things in my life that are going to stay the same, and what are the things in my life that I'm open to changing? So that's just an interesting one, I think.
Well, and here's what's never going to change in commerce, and I'll bring it back to AI. I'll bring it back to IP, which is really cool because those two words, AI and IP, those are the key words.
Mhm.
It ultimately is about trust. Trust in transactions never changes. Like, okay, is the AI, it's called artificial intelligence for a reason. It's artificial. All right. Now, I would encourage you to use, I use AI all the time. I love it. It's just like we're doing this podcast here. We're doing this interview. Thank goodness because of electricity, because we have lights. We're not using, we're using artificial light, right? Oh my goodness no, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay, people. We love to go this draconian, pathway. And we do this whenever new technology. Boy, the battle between Westinghouse and Edison. Edison, they're literally like electrocuting things to prove that Edison's pathway of electricity was dangerous. And Westinghouse actually ended up winning because they were more influential in the marketplace. They had more trust. But part of it, and again, this is why I'm a big trademark fan. Number one reason why I love trademarks, because I'm an asset guy. The only type of intellectual property that never goes away, as long as you renew it, it's permanent IP, is a trademark. Trademarks are as long as you renew them. Coca-Cola has been around since the 1800s. The oldest currently operating trademark is a UK trademark. It's for Bass Ale. If you ever had a Bass Ale beer, the orange logo, that's a trademark. That's been around, much longer than I have, much longer listener than you will. So as you think about these new processes you're creating, know that you're solving a problem. And because of that, people are going to start to trust you. They're going to create a brand affiliate. The mind never forgets what the heart remembers. And so when you can build a solution that it helps heal people's pain, makes them either feel more clarity, more confidence, more capability, or more coordination, you are going to be able to own that space of trust for them, which is really profound.
So Tony, so as we sort of start wrapping up here, so with AI accelerating innovation, how can companies safeguard what makes them uniquely human? Because I think that's one of the things we keep hearing and also sharing ourselves.
You nailed
is
it.
what can they do to safeguard what makes them uniquely human, including the sort of the cognitive and affective capabilities while scaling their IP?
Yeah, you're nailing it. You're getting me excited. So I'll say this first. I would be remiss not to say this. Kevin Kelly said this, the curator of Wired magazine. He said the 20th century was about the electrification of everything. And the 21st century is about the cognification of everything, which is pretty powerful. Again, I mentioned I live in this small town in Pennsylvania. It's nestled along the Delaware River. And there's a wonderful picture that we are very proud of. And that is there's the Delaware River. And at one point, people would transport themselves down the river. Then they got smarter. They created a new technology called a canal. And then next to the river, they built a canal. And then next to the river, they said, wow, the trains are coming 100 years later. They built a train track. And oh, the automobile's coming. And they built a highway. And there's a picture of somebody in a canoe, a canal boat, a train, and a car going down this highway. You don't see the airplane yet. So this idea of what AI is doing, it is cognifying our humanity, which is going to allow us this capability. Just like I'm not going to have to paddle myself back and forth up and down the Delaware River. I do it for entertainment now, right? I'm not going to have to attach myself to a mule to drag me up and down the canal. I'm not going to have to get on a train that's set at a time. I can get my car and go freely. AI is freeing the cognitive, the mind. Now, that's scary for a lot of people because what's happening is this is like, particularly, again, I love it in the education space, right? The university, the ivory tower, it's akin to the Catholic Church, right? And I was raised Catholic. I appreciate my Catholic faith and my upbringing, but because of the printing press, that changed. Well, AI is changing what we call the ivory tower. So the ability that I think is so exciting is first and foremost to help decrease the cognitive load that so many of us have now taken on. It's like, wow, I have electricity I don't have to light candles anymore. The ability to help us. I would like to say I always look at it as augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. Now, what that does, it frees me. You said the two magical words. It frees me to actually get in touch with my cognition, right? Which is that's going back to now Roman times. Cognition is more of a very, very 20th century idea, like IQ test, class rank. Back in the day, warriors didn't have that. They needed trust. Going back to the trust word. So I think what is happening with the AI, it is decreasing that cognitive load so that we can actually be our best essence, which is our cognitive instinct, our instinctive nature, our affective capability, and we can be fully human in the best possible way. So many of it, I always jokingly say to most people, you don't own your IP. Your IP owns you, and it's living rent-free in your head, and you need to get it out of your head on your balance sheet. Use AI to help you do it. So let's give some brass tacks to listeners before we close. I know we got to land the plane here, but I want you to go to your favorite, if you're Perplexity, if you're Chat, whatever I always, when I work with clients, got to use AI. Because again, what's happening is it's eliminating the wall of expertise. We're using the wisdom of crowds through the the human wisdom. And I'm like, use the IP. You use the AI to help you shape your IP. So type in your favorite search. I am a blank in this blank industry. Oh, I am, in this case, go back to me. I am an educator in the education space. What trademark class should I go for? Class 41, educational services. Okay. You're a technologist working on a SaaS solution. It's going to come back and say class 42. Look at my website. What IP do you think I have here? What should I file? It's available to us all. Now, what I do at the Intellectual Capitalist is prepare you with the mindsets, right? You still want to have the right mindsets, but also it's this idea, right? The book, newest read, I literally just got to tell you, is the book Primal Intelligence.
Well, yeah, I'm busy reading
right?
it. It's
I think
incredible.
you told me about somebody at CollabCon told me. Well, I'm working on this riff. So not only do you have primal intelligence, you also have primal instinct. So Brendon, this would look at your print. Like you're a 9 in your print. 9s are very instinctive. It's a somatic. When peace and harmony is not happening. It's not how you feel or how you think. It's a somatic response, right? So you have primal intelligence, which is a cognition. You have primal instinct, which is an instinctive energy. You have also primal intuition, which is this sensing capability, which is really in the archetype is your primal essence. So I think, and what does primal mean? It doesn't mean like a monkey. It's not primate. It's the fundamental foundation. So we as human beings will be freer. Just like, again, let me go back. I did yoga today in an old text. That poor person slaving for pennies a week. Pennies a week just to put food on the table. And now that yoga instructor has some sort of a living. It's profound. So I'm sorry, I'm a capitalist. I think we've never been alive in a better time in humanity, except for the people who are going to come after us. So our job is to take what God gives us, our creator, if it's Allah, Buddha, Yoda, Jesus, I don't care who you ascribe to, but know your creator put a thought or an idea in your soul. And now you need to get out there and actually package it, protect it, and really begin to profit it, not just for yourself, but for humanity.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Tony, what would you suggest folks do if they want to learn more about how you can help them through the sort of mindset journey of understanding the value of IP?
Yeah. Well, first I would take this podcast and listen to it again. That's step number one, because we threw a lot on the table and it can get overwhelming, and you don't want to remember, the biggest danger you have is IP ignorance. So you're going to go into your little hole and get overwhelmed. Don't do that. Just know you're creating an asset. It doesn't happen overnight. It does happen over time. Number 2, take the podcast, get the transcript, put it in your AI, and then say, hey, AI, I call my AI Sage. Hey, Sage, based on this podcast, what could I do immediately that Tony and Brendon have shared? Don't trust us. Use the tools and technology that we're talking about. From there, if you really want to expand your mindsets, I invite you to have a free, no pitch, complimentary consultation. It's called the IP Conversation with me personally. Take action on that. You can go to theipconversation.com. That's THation.com. That'll take you right to my Calendly link. I'll do a complimentary, no pitch, 45-minute session with you, kind of do an IP audit to see where you're at. I find that people even just do the intake form, but don't show up for the call, get tremendous value out of that to begin with. So that's one action you can take. Second action, you can listen to the Intellectual Capitalist Show, which we feature other entrepreneurs who are intellectual capitalists. And the third and final call of action would be if you want a crash course in IP education, get those mindsets. We have a new offering that we're offering in 2026 called the IP Simplifier. So just go to ipsimplifier.com. You
Mhm.
can learn more about that. It is a 21-day crash course in IP education. The outcome of that is as a result of that class, that course, that series, which is led by me personally via digital Zoom, is you will come out of there with a minimal viable protected IP. And that's the goal. Now, monetizing it, growing it, you do that later, but just get that first piece of property for yourself. So those are the 3 or 4 action steps I would recommend for listeners. Is that helpful?
Wow, that is awesome. Tony, thank you so much. I guess maybe just one last thing in closing. I mean, sort of, you know, here we are sort of heading into the final weeks, minus the holidays, of 2025. What other advice do you have for the folks listening?
Well, the most important thing I would say is if you're listening and you've made it this far, I would sense that you're growth minded, you're ambitious. And I know you said earlier decisive, but this is one of my new insights is you're also collaborative. So instead of GMAD entrepreneur, I've reframed it to say a GMAC entrepreneur. You're growth minded, you're ambitious, and you're collaborative. And so what I would encourage you to do is continue to get to know yourself better and better. I would recommend do your print, do your Colby, do your strengths finder. If you've done those already, you probably have them stuffed in a drawer or in your Google Drive and you haven't looked at them. Pull them out at the end of the year and digest them because I'll say this part of your IP approach, how you approach IP is very unique to you. So, like Brendon, he's a 9-7. He has this brilliant capability to create community of other people. But then the 7 is the great thinker. Dan Sullivan's a 7. The lucid clarity of thinking when you're on point is magnificent. So, Brendon, you're going to create IP based on creating community and lucid thinking. So, I would start there. Know thyself. Know thyselfy.
Yeah.
That's key. Matter of fact, if you want to, we have another offer called Know Thyselfy. You can go to knowthyselfy.com and you can get those profiles and go through. I think it's a 6-session series on really getting to know yourself. So if you're not in strategic coach and you want like, what are they talking about? The print, the Colby, go to knowthyselfy.com because that is how you get to know thyself here in the 21st.
Yeah, I love that name, Know Thy Selfie. It's
Yeah,
very,
well, that's the next trademark, and it's it. All right, you domain it, claim it, all right, and blockchain it. You want to do those 3 things when you're
yes,
coming up with a new idea.
that is awesome. In fact, in closing, that was actually so I have this annual theme every year, and my annual theme 5 years ago was Know Thyself. And then, of course, I saw some material from Strategic Coach, and they said, "How would you like to know your unique ability?" I'm like, that sounds like pretty much what I'm looking for this year, and that's where my journey started. So that was
Beautiful.
pretty sweet.
Oh, that's been profound. And it's been a real joy. Again, thank you for creating this experience for your listeners. Listeners, thank you for listening. I trust that you got value from this. But again, I just have to give this shout out to you, Brendon, that your capability to bring this energy. So the 9 is very industrious and joyful. So you radiate that. I like to say Emerson said it, not me. He said, who you are out so loudly, I do not hear a word you say. So thanks for being such a great host. I appreciate you.
Yeah, Tony, thanks so much for being on the show. And for those of you who don't know what Tony's talking about as far as print and these numbers, most people are familiar with Enneagram. Print is kind of a variation of Enneagrams, except in print you get 2 numbers, and Enneagram you just get 1.
Yeah.
Tony, thanks so much for being with us today. I know you've provided incredible value, and I hope we can get you closer to your 2035 goal of creating over $1 billion in IP value.
You got it. Thank you. Thank you very much.